let's talk about Severance from 2022, the first season, and the second season is, fingers crossed, coming around. So I'll talk about some of the bumps in the road that it has encountered, but hoping it'll be here soon. But what Severance is about is Mark leads a team of office workers whose memories have been surgically divided between their work and personal lives. When a mysterious colleague appears outside of work, it begins a journey to discover the truth about their jobs, and it's created by Dan Erickson. So the whole premise is, you ever wish you could turn off your brain and work efficiently without any distractions from your regular life or the weight of your insignificance bearing down on you? Well, do we have the opportunity for you? Get yourself severed. It's not a sex thing. I know it sounds kind of like that. It's absolutely safe for work. In fact, it's the best for work. Or is it?
Yeah.
So creator and writer Dan Erickson got the crazy idea that I'm sure we've all had at some point in our lives, that when you're working at a mindless and uncreative job that requires none of our personality and all of our workforce potential. So while working at a door factory, that's what he called it, because he said it sounds more like Monsters, Inc. Essentially a company that made, sold, and installed doors and fences, Erickson was struck by the idea of clocking out of his own mind. In an interview on the Q&A podcast as part of Backstory magazine, Erickson remembers the thought that launched the award-winning show, saying, "I was there and I was going into work one morning and I literally had this idea that was like, what if there was some way where you could be at a desk doing your job, but you didn't have to be. You didn't have to associate with that time. You could pull away and not experience it. And you could just feel like you had skipped the workday." And that's a kind of horrifying thing to catch yourself wanting. And it was all just born out of that.
Yeah. You hate your job so hard that you don't even want to exist in that space,
Yeah, or not even just like that you hate it, right? It could just be so meaningless to you, right? Like it just doesn't demand anything from you other than just like input some numbers, crack some codes, whatever you're doing, but like it's meaningless. Like I love a day that's just data entry. I do love that. I love a day where I could zone out. I'm just listening to music and I'm just like writing stuff and I don't have to think. But if that was every day, it drives me crazy.
Agreed.
So I think that's really what it is. It's like, I wish I could just go somewhere else and not have to remember that I did that.
Yeah.
So having such a mindless job can be rewarding in that way. And it was at this job, actually, and others that were equally unfulfilling but paid the bills, that Erickson was able to focus and write the pilot for the show. And it made me think that my partner actually had a similar situation where he's working at a security position with very minimal interaction with humans and like anything, that left him with a lot of time on his hands and very bored. And so he wrote an entire book. Yeah. He was written an entire book at that point. So this idea that nobody wants to work anymore is not only false because people have never wanted to work, but also a gross workforce version of the girls don't date nice guys argument, because it's not real. Yeah. Right? It's like, first of all, you're not a nice guy. Work is not a nice guy. Yeah. And no, we don't want to date you. Yeah. Nobody wants to work. Working sucks. It's laborious. A word with synonyms like arduous, heavy, difficult, strenuous, grueling, and murderous. Look it up.
That's fun.
Dictionary. Right? The pandemic highlighted these very feelings in an extreme way, reducing us to the bare bones components of working, removing our interactions with coworkers and maybe some of those other maybe more meaningful interactions that we had throughout the day. And it's literally like, do the work. You're staring at a screen. Yeah. And now all the interactions you have with people is also staring at a screen, which could be like, which kind of just awakened us to the truth of what we've been doing this whole time, because we didn't have those little sprinkles in to be like, oh, everything's fine.
Yeah, the distractions were gone.
Yes. So it reminded us that we are not built only for working. We are humans, complex with our needs, and like tedious, mismanaged plants, we were all yearning for some sunlight and community photosynthesis. And so when Severance premiered in 2022, we all felt the message deeply. I was like, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like anyone who like just stays at a job for their coworkers, but then now you don't ever get to see your coworkers. It's like, why am I here?
Yeah.
My loyalty was not to the company, it was to the people. And if the people are no longer like keeping me here, bye, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I stayed at many jobs just because of the people who were there. And a big part of what I really love about the job I do in the daytime was always the people, whether it's coworkers or the other people that I interacted with. And without them there, I was like, whatever, nothing matters. I don't matter. And I hate this. So until I was able to like incorporate ways to interact with humans again, it was like, I'm going to go crazy. But I do know it's like, I do really love my job most of the time. So, and I know that I'm like an outlier. Not many places have like the same feelings. So I get it. And I've also lived for like mind-numbing jobs too. So in Severance, employees at the mega company of undisclosed mysterious purpose, Lumen, has undergone an extreme new surgery that severs their minds into two parts, right? So we have ourselves as we know them, our outside everyday life parts of ourselves, which remember everything we've done in life and interact with our family, our friends, and our grief. And whatever other heaviness we be carrying around with us, right? These are affectionately referred to as outies, which is kind of cute. But now, through the severance process, they have birthed a new version of themselves that exists alongside this first self, one that does not remember their life other than work. And it's birth as in like they wake up on a table, and in the first moment of their existence as this human, because again, they did not exist before this. Your work person is born in the severance process. They wake up on a table and they listen to words of someone through a speaker, and it's separated and new to them. The creator, Erickson, mentioned that in some of the first drafts of the script, it had more of like a Cronenbergian like flesh technology where where it like at first it was Mark who's on the table, not Helly, and he's like birds out of what he said he can only describe as an anus. Like a fleshy thing just squirts him out, and then he's like talking to who the person on the intercom, and it's kind of this idea of like when you're in the womb and you just hear your parents through like this like barrier, and then all of a sudden you're born, you go through the door, now you exist.
So in that version, it's like they're clones more so than themselves.
It was very, there's a lot of differences in some of the first iterations that were pretty interesting, but I like this version. Not just because I don't particularly love flesh technology, but because it is like, it still holds that like birth aspect to it. Because they are very much new. Right? And this is the only world that they know, the only world they're allowed to live in. And that's scary. Like they're babies. So these are innies, right? So you have outies and innies. And once an employee clocks in to Lumen, taking the elevator to their respective floors, something triggers the severance, activating their innies existence. So they turn on. And now they're like, oh, time for work. I don't know what happened between now and then, which is so scary. Like that's the scary thing to me. Like, work sucks. You don't know. You don't know what you're doing. So, and Innie's whole world is inside the office. So when they clock out, the elevator switches their brain back onto their outie life and memory. And at first, the idea can seem positive, right? Some people already practice a form of severance in their lives now. Though not obviously as extreme as surgical manipulation, there are workers who are known as extreme segmenters. And in an article on HuffPost titled Apple TV's Severance Nails How Absolutely Inhuman Our Work Culture Is, writer Monica Torres explains how researchers studying our work-life balance have designated workers into different types, saying segmenters separate work and home through objects. For example, by having separate calendars, uniforms, or keys for each place or activity, segmenters love ending the workday at the same time every day. Integrators, on the other hand, are workers that prefer for everything to be intertwined and don't need hard lines because where work starts and begins, between where work starts and begins. Integrators don't mind taking an hour break at lunch and then going back to work. And then, there's people on the in between. I've definitely known people as segmenters who are like, the workplace that's my work me. And I remember saying to Kat, because there's like clearly this chemistry between two characters.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is like a whole new definition to the work wife, because it's work, like any Mark doesn't know anything about Outie Mark. Like Outie Mark gonna have a whole life. So like people who are in there might have families and children.
Yeah.
And they don't know. And then they come in here and they're like, oh, I fall in love with you. I'm a different person in here.
Yeah, there was like a whole, like in the background, a news article that said, and Innie got pregnant.
Oh.
So the Outie had to like deal with it. But like, they're like, how did that happen? Are you not monitoring the Innies? You know what I mean? Like it was like a whole just sidebar conversation that one of the protesters were having.
Yeah. And it's like, is it consensual then? Because it's your body, but the Innie you might have consented, but the Outie you didn't. Yeah. So what? Yeah, it's like it's
and then you sign this
so
contract where you can't know who else is in there, so you're like, you don't even get to know who the person is. That's crazy.
Yeah, and you're gonna have this baby, and it's like they don't ever know.
Or like severed for pregnancy. That's a theme.
Yes, I totally forgot about that. Yeah. Some people get severed so they don't remember that pregnancy hurts, like giving birth
and
hurts.
Like that severed version never gets to meet their child.
Yeah. Oh, that's super sad. Yeah. We should, like, I get it. Like, sometimes you don't want to remember stuff.
Yeah.
Because stuff can be hard. But we've talked about this. We've talked about how important it is to sometimes hold on to those memories because they influence who you become and are.
Yeah.
And our sunshine of the spotless mind. So the show follows Mark, Helly, Irving, and Dylan, all working diligently under the watchful eyes of the hot, just regular Mr. Melchick. I was like, what? Like, listen, okay, the costume.
No, he's hot. I get it. He just scares me.
He is scary.
The eyes do the rage thing that he does with the smile.
It's a whole thing. Like, he's so good at it.
He's a fantastic actor, yeah.
The costume department knew what they were doing. They gave him those pants on purpose.
That's true.
It makes you think, like in high school, we had a Spanish teacher, and he always wore really tight pants and like tight shirts, and he'd be like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?
The hormones. You need to stop.
This is not right."
Yeah.
This talk about like when women are like, you're wearing a dress and it's inappropriate. Like, he was inappropriate. Mr. Melchick is inappropriate for the workplace.
He's just too hot.
So he is like super corporate. He's like your boss. He does like the smiles that are uncanny valley because they're insincere.
Not mean them. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's manipulative as heck.
Yeah.
So, but this team work in the metadata refinement division of Lumen. Question mark what that is? No one knows. Helly is a new addition, and after being just born into this corporate world, is immediately over it and refuses to live in the sunless void that is their office. She's like, I'm not having it. I don't want to live without the sun. I quit.
Yeah.
I resign. So she sends many requests to her Outie asking that they resign, but is consistently denied. And Helly gets more and more desperate for escape and threatens her own safety to get the message through. And still, she gets a severe, like, thrashing from her Outie that's like, you're not real. I'm real. You're not allowed to leave. And it's like, that's scary. It's sad. Mark is a longtime employee who we learn has a tragic history that led him to the severed process. After losing his wife, an event that still haunts Outie Mark, he opted for a few hours every day to simply not have to remember he'd loved and lost. And it's totally relatable. I get it. Only even without the specific memories of the loss, Innie Mark will often physically feel the aftermath. Innie Mark will often feel the aftermath of Outie Mark's depression, proving that the Severance isn't without its flaws, even in this regard. Yeah. Like, there's a character that mentions, like, when you, like, the other you spent all night crying. Yeah. You feel it. Yeah. It's not like everyone else knows. We look at you, we see your face. Your face is the same. But now the problem is I don't know why I'm sad.
Yeah.
So it feels even more like you're like not in control of yourself. And it's just like a constant state of like trauma in that regard, because you don't know. Like, and a lot of them start exhibiting weird like hallucinations or feelings that are clearly being compounded because they're not able to work through their own traumas and stresses in a healthy way as the A&E, because they don't have any context. So like Irving, love him to death. He has some really severe traumatic responses, and it's like, I don't know why. So viewers follow these characters as they slowly begin to question the placating conditions that they work under, and they venture outside the floor's white walls and encounter all kinds of troubling scenarios, leading to an understanding that the severance process is far more troubling than first believed. Although anyone on the outside would tell you it's a big red flag. People are protesting. They're like, this is... And it feels kind of real. I feel like if this existed, people would 100% sign up.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't ask any questions.
Well, yeah, because there's people who like don't want to be in their lives because their lives are sad for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be attached to that for part of the day. Or it's like, you know what, that's a paycheck. That's going to put food on the table. I don't really care.
Yeah.
What we have to do to get there.
Well, that was like, I've always had that conversation with people who are like, I wish I had a clone and then they could go to work. And I was like, okay, but they can't only go to work.
Yeah.
Because then that clone is going to get mad.
Yeah.
The clone's going to get mad, and the clone's not going to want to be the work clone. Like, that's not fair, because it's you.
Switch with you, yeah.
You don't already want to work. You'd have to, like, there'd have to be like, okay, you take these days, I take these days. Right?
Yeah,
like, we just
like
switch
a transition so that everyone gets like a 3-day work week or something.
Yeah. Not everyone's going to, like, yeah. I've always been like, that's cruel. And then this show was made, and I was like, see?
Yeah, there's got to be, 2 U's, excellent. Split it up.
Yeah. And, for all this, the show is really creative with its horror, and that it is as cold and unfeeling as corporate culture is in reality. The first iterations of the script featured more dramatic sci-fi or fantastical realism inspirations with flesh technology or the presence of robots, maybe. Erikson mentioned, like, there was a time where he had one of the floors was like a replica of what the floors they're on, but it was like almost like a war zone. Like something terrible had happened there. And then a pair of disembodied legs run by. And one of the biggest rules that Ben Stiller instilled on the production, like when he was talking about taking it on, was that they needed an answer for everything. It was like, we don't all have to know about it. It could still be weird and peculiar for viewers, but the team behind it needs to have the answers. Yeah. So when they had that in the script, he was like, what is that? What does that mean? And Erikson's like, I don't know. It's weird. He was like, okay, we can't do that.
Yeah, it has to have like a plot twist to reveal later down the line.
Or not even, it doesn't even have to be that heavy. It just has to be like, we need to know what the motivations are. We need to know what the point is of that. So that's kind of relieving to me.
Yeah.
To know that everything has a point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that does not always happen. He said some people who were suggesting notes, some of them were just like, do weird stuff. And then it doesn't matter if it doesn't have an answer. Just have fun. And it was like, this isn't Lost. Okay, we don't need to do that.
Yeah. Media needs
what is the smoke monster? What about the polar bear? Like, we never answered the polar bear in Lost.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It just has to be weird,
Yeah, it was just
weird
like
island stuff. Just let it happen.
Anyway, the finished piece, however, is corporate and realistic, even in its absurdity. Like, it feels like it's adjacent to reality every time. It's like, here's what would really happen, and then it's like,
yeah.
And then you're like, oh, that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The show repurposes corporate terminology and culture into something far more honest and equally grim. The severance procedure is an extreme form of the non-disclosure agreement, inspiring questions about what the employees of Lumen are up to down there in their cubicles. The meaningless nonsense designations of their roles is amplified. Like, what does macro data refinement even mean? It's nonsense.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Sometimes, like, someone tells you what they do, and you're like, "What is that?" That's make believe.
It's like a nod to like the jobs that like exist but don't need to.
Yeah.
But they make them because people need money to live. So they're like, all right, yeah, you just sit in a room and do this for a few hours. We'll pay you. Great. But you're like, what do you do though? And no one knows.
Yeah, it's so weird. And it's just like, yeah, it's, and also the fuzziness of it, like, because it's all compartmentalized, you don't know what you're doing. And that's the I think that is the scariest thing, is like, you don't know what you have created, what you could have done.
Yeah, you could have done like messed up stuff, or like they could be hurting you in there and you have no idea, because they are. I mean, ultimately, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No access.
In that same article, Torres reinforces the terminology's newly villainous meaning, saying, at Lumen, obtuse business language is also a euphemism for corporate misdeeds. The break room is actually a detention center designed to break employees' spirits, and an overtime contingency mechanism is a sinister surveillance tool that violates employees' privacy. So it's like stuff that we use, and it's like, this one's scary. And as far as the innies of the macro data refinement sector know, their job is to sort numbers. Sort them into where, why, and what. What is not addressed. The process is a bizarre blend of monotony and abstraction. The workers are told to sort numbers based on how the numbers make them feel. So WO numbers, they make you feel sad. FC numbers are associated with happiness and joy. DR numbers will scare you. And MA numbers make you angry. Nice. And you're like, how does number equal emotion? So when new hire Helly inquires about this process, wondering how she could possibly know when a number is scary, she is told that she'll simply feel it. And she does, and is crazy. And this odd association with something mundane eliciting a puzzling, vivid, and emotional reaction reminds me of inherited traumas, where our bodies may be triggered by something our brain remembers. Sometimes that memory isn't even ours, but of our ancestors, our relatives before us, and we somehow remember it. And now we have this visceral feeling, and it's not even ours. Or we don't know why, right? Something in that severance process has inspired these emotions, tied to numbers on a screen, and the idea that technology could have such an impact on us is terrifying in itself. Like, that is really, really scary.
Program the brain to feel emotions with the sight of numbers.
Yeah. So it's like, what is like they had to have experienced some type of trauma during that to trigger it.
For sure. Or they're like, like in the onboarding process, they're like doing buzzing or like shock therapy, I guess, or like therapy, you know what I mean? Like where they buzz you for different numbers so you have different emotional responses. But like there had to be some sort of like training to get that, or even, I don't know, torture of sorts.
Something is going on, right? But even more troubling than the physical response of these employees is the ambiguity around what sorting the numbers means. In an article on Mashable titled 4 Fascinating Things We Learned from the Severance Companion Book, writer Belen Edwards uncovers some troubling hypotheses around the work done at Lumen, saying, what does the macro data refinement team do? If the Lexington letter is to be believed, macro data refiners are unknowingly engaging in corporate espionage. Peggy's Innie tells her that she completed a big file titled Lexington at 2:30 p.m. Later that day, Peggy hears that a truck belonging to Dorner Therapeutics, a Lumen competitor, had been blown up, destroying several Dorner devices and killing 6. The bomb went off at 2:32 p.m., just after the Lexington file had been completed. Peggy acknowledges in her letter that it could just be a coincidence, but knowing how sick and twisted Lumen is, the timing is too close to be an accident. Right. And so this idea had me considering the game Orwell, which I've talked about quite a few times on the show. But it's a game where you play as a government employee surveying the public looking for dangerous terrorists. And in the game, you were only given a computer screen to work with. Like, it's literally just a computer surface.
Yeah.
And you search the web and search people's social media in order to figure out where they are and what they're doing and why it's bad. So you navigate the cyber world to find answers. And there's like having this distance from the humans you're surveying allows you to make some drastic decisions that could be harmful to the humans on the other side of the screen. But you don't have that direct connection, right? So this separation from action and consequence alleviates the hesitation one might have when making these decisions where someone's life could be in danger. It's like that, well, I don't know if it was actually real or if it's been disproven, but where they said, like, if you put the buzzer or whatever, it would shock somebody else, and like people would buzz it anyway. It was like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But it's because we don't hear it, right? We don't hear it, we don't see it, so it's like, whatever.
Or the movie we watched, The Button or whatever, where it's like, you kill someone else by touching the button, but you don't know them.
Yeah, but you could know them.
Yeah. How
do you get $1 million? Oh, oops, your husband died and you inherited it. Anyway, essentially, if we reduce corporate espionage and violence to mere numbers on a screen to a game or something so unlike the consequences of those actions would inspire, we can also remove the emotional calculation of the ones pulling the trigger, so to speak. Right? Yeah. It also makes you think of like even just Snowden, because when we had our whole surveillance episode, right, there's so many things that people do right now where we're not always fully understanding the gravity of what we're doing. You're just inputting data into a sheet, you're pushing buttons, and we don't always know what those buttons are going to lead to because we're so separated from the end results that it doesn't even feel like it's our responsibility. So it takes someone like Snowden to be like, it is our responsibility. Though, it took a long time to do that. So he profited a lot off of that system before he said anything. Anyway, there's a lot to be said about that. But that's what I think is really scary is like, what are they doing down there? How much control does this company have? And the fact that you would give, like, we already kind of give ourselves over often just to survive, and we work for soulless companies. Yeah. Apple TV exists, right? Made this amazing show. It is still a soulless company. And we have to, like, there's always this constant grappling of, being a consumer in a capitalist society. Like, we have no choice but to do that. But you can still be very aware of what's happening, and you try to be more conscious of it and make better decisions. But at the end of the day, there are going to be things that we just don't even know we're impacting, and that's what the severance process is.
Everything you don't see behind closed doors or behind like all the secrets exist.
Beyond the perplexing division designation, the corporate lingo and culture peppers its way into the experiences of the workers, only in slightly peculiar, unsettling ways, where in our world we may be gifted a pizza party instead of something more helpful, like, I don't know, a raise. So we can feed our families.
Health insurance.
Health insurance. Like time off.
Crappy,
Not have to work 8 hours a day. We don't, everyone, we don't have to do that. We work so we wouldn't have to do all 7 days. We can keep going. We can keep asking for better. We don't have to accept what we have right now. But unlike, similar to a pizza party, but a little more weird, the metadata refinement team will be given a music dance experience for a few minutes of defiant jazz. This is what I call it. And they just dance. Or they get like items, like really meaningless prizes for doing a good job of the number sorting. And it's things for them to aspire to. Small things to they feel rewarded and like what they're doing matters, but it doesn't, well, it does matter, but not in the way that they're saying it matters. So the whole show is a brilliant critique on our work culture, the idea of hustle culture, and making your whole life your job. Right? Because it doesn't have to be, but people try to make that cool. And I think it's so silly. Lumen boasts that you shouldn't live to work, but work to live. And yet, an innie's whole life is work. There's also a conversation to be said about Mark's residence at the Lumen-owned neighborhood. Because it's like where he lives is all employees of Lumen. So it's, what was that, the corporate towns?
I'll talk about it a little bit, but like industry towns,
industry towns. Thank you. So that, like, it's literally like, even though he's separated from his innie, he is still, his whole life is Lumen. Like you're still doing it, dude.
Yeah.
You didn't leave anything. So I have questions. There's stuff to be said about that. There's stuff to be said about the oppressive and peculiar Mrs. Coble's life. She's like the head, and it's like, what is going on with her and her mom and like religion and like and what, and then also anything to do with the founding father and family of Lumen, Kier Egan and the Egans. It's like, what is that? It's so weird. Like everything is so weird. It's beautiful. I love it. It's kind of got like that Atlanta peculiarity of like, you're like, what?
And if everything means something, like under the Ben Stiller stipulation, you know, like then we're gonna get answers for all that stuff, hopefully.
Yeah, stipulation. So there is a second season greenlit and underway, though it has been stalled due to some creative disagreements amongst the team. Ben Stiller has gone on record saying like there's some of the team behind the creation are not in agreement with the rest of them about what is happening and what things mean. So everything has to have a meaning, but they have not agreed on what everything means. So that's causing like they're like arguing over that. But there's also the writer's strike. And so there's a lot to be considered there. But after the truly thrilling and successful and stressful ending season 1 left us with, I can't wait for it to pick back up and answer all the questions that it left us with, because it's a thrilling ending. What a great ending.
Yeah.
Just like, so stressed. And I mean, there's like, is Lumen killing people or like reviving people, stealing people, making them into work slaves?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they are they are slaves. This is their whole life is down here.
And they don't get the benefits of the pay. So like their outies do, but they don't. Yeah.
It's like, how much do I make? I don't even know. What does it matter?
Yeah.
Like, I have the vending machine.
You get 2 coins a day. Pool. Like what? Yeah. It's a whole thing. I'll talk about a little bit. I'm talking more about the show than I probably should be, because as the fact section, I probably should be talking about other stuff. But I just loved it so much. So I was like, I need to get all my little thoughts out.
But yeah,
so